Tonight, what? Please, when I kiss you like that, don't open your mouth. Tonight, what we're going to do is you're going to get a scholarship, gang, all right, in law school, loudmouth style. You're going to learn things they don't teach at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or anywhere else. As a matter of fact, we were told not to talk about tonight's topic, and guess by who? Judges and lawyers. Well, judges. Who picks them? Who owns them? We're going to go behind the judge's bench, into the judge's robes, and find out how dirty their underwear is. Inside their chambers, and take a peek under those robes. You better change your underwear, because we're coming after you. Let me introduce, please, if you will, to the jury tonight assembled. The players at home base, we have Jay Yelkowski. Stan, right? Okay, Stan. I'm going to call you Jay. Do you mind?
Not at all.
Stan, the corrupt New York City judges, all right? At loudmouth number 1, old friend of ours, Jay Fisher, preeminent attorney, also from the state of New Jersey. Stan, you're an attorney.
Yes.
All right? 26 years we now find.
Right.
33 years for Jay, all right? He's got a little on you. Let me hear your story, counselor, and no pontificating. Give me your story.
Well, it started off as well, I was married, had a lovely wife, 4 children, moved to Scarsdale.
Was she a lovely wife?
Up until a certain point,
okay.
Yes. And in a way, I guess I would consider her still lovely, actually.
Good.
But anyway, we had 4 children, and I moved to Scarsdale. I had 2 cars.
Scarsdale, for the folks who aren't from this New York area, is a very affluent area in Westchester County where very prominently white, waspy area where, go ahead.
All right. And somewhere along the line, I got the shock of my life in that while I was busy working very hard.
How long are you guys married?
At the time, we were married about 14 years at that
14
time.
years. You've been working hard. What were you
Very
doing?
hard. I was a pretty good businessman, so to speak. I was in a lot of different business. I had a commodity seat on a commodity exchange. I was a lawyer.
Making good bread.
Making a lot of bread.
Good money. Nice house?
Nice house. And I find out that she has an adulterous relationship with some guy for something like 8 years.
She had it for 8 years? What is it? She had an adulterous relationship for 8 years, and you didn't know until after 8 years?
In Spanish, they call it a cabron, and in English, we call it a cuckold.
In English, we also call it a fool, but go ahead.
And a fool.
So you find out she's had an adulterous relationship. This somewhat pees you off, right?
Well, it
do you
becomes
Do you try and bring the marriage back together again?
Yes, we
what
try.
A fool. Okay. 8 years, and you try and bring it back.
Well, when you have 4 children, it makes
How old were the children?
They ranged in age from, at the time, about I guess about 5 to about 14 or 15.
And you were sure that the 5 and the others below that were your children?
Hopefully, I would hope, and I think so.
Okay.
Ooh.
Tough questions, pal, but they've got to be asked. Right?
Of course, those thoughts did go through my mind, I think, like most people. However, I'm satisfied, and even if they weren't, it would not
That's the important thing. You're
change anything. All right. I find out that the guy that she has the relationship with is the gardener.
The gardener?
Yeah.
So instead of planting flowers, he was planting your wife, huh?
I also find out that a good portion of the money that I'm bringing into the house is being given to this fellow, and he buys a big gardening company as a result of taking money that my wife gives him from, because I trusted her implicitly with everything.
Sure, I don't blame you.
Okay.
I want to hear your divorce action. I want to hear what I was told was a horror story. So far, it seems like the horror story is that the gardener was...
That's the least of the horror story.
That's the least of the horror
That's the
story?
least of the horror story, because I find that...
You make a property settlement with your wife?
No, this was before property...
Okay, what type of... when you say she had been giving a lot of your money to him, how much money? Did you ever trace that?
I couldn't trace enough for him to buy a very expensive and important company.
Did you find out how much he paid for that company?
I didn't, but I found out that they
You're
had
an
over
attorney. Why didn't you find
$100,000. Well, I found out a lot, though. I was a pretty good investigator. I found that she had about 14 accounts in connection with him. One of them had over $100,000 in it, and one with $20,000, and several other accounts.
Okay, this was after he bought the gardening company.
Yeah. Now we're into
Pretty good money. Now, did
the...
you also send her silver and things to put into gold and all that to put into
Well, when I was... one of my businesses was collecting silver from various countries, and I used to import it. She was taking that silver, some of it, and giving it to him. That was how they were getting the money. All right. Now, I'd like to get to the corruption of the courts.
All right,
this
good.
is the more serious thing. People, you know, we have problems, but we
Aim
expect...
at how your story gets us to corruption.
Right. Whatever we did, and let me say this here, I was no angel, and I was no better than her.
You have been screwing around, too.
I screwed around, too.
Oh. You know, I deplore that kind of conduct. No, really, I'm seriously. Had you been screwing around for 8 years?
Yeah.
So maybe she found out... Wait a second, this isn't really funny. Maybe she found out you were screwing around with a maid or something?
No, I don't think so. No.
She never found out?
No, I was very careful to, you know, to protect myself.
She was obviously careful, too. She had a gardener who she thought could plant it.
Well, anyway, the case, we recognize that something's wrong, because the judge, you know,
Thank
lawyers
God, that didn't take 8 years, too.
You could sense when a judge wants to get a decision from a jury, they have a lot of ability to, by facial expressions, by...
You had a jury in this case?
Yes.
Is there, Jay, let me ask you, in a divorce case, is there normally a jury?
Not normally. My question, very simply, is why was there a jury in this case?
There's always a jury in New York City on a case
contested, this was a contested?
Contested act. Well, of course it was contested.
What did the judge do to the jury that, in fact, demonstrated his view? Not your opinion. What did he do?
His facial expressions when I testified...
What did he do? What facial expressions? That's a conclusion.
Well, that's in the book. Like if I would while
I don't
I'm
have time to read the book. Tell us.
While I'm testifying, he would interrupt me. He would say, he would go make faces like that when I'd say something.
Was he having trouble with your credibility? Is that it? Did he find your story incredible?
Yes. He was, no, that's what he tried to impress the jury with.
So he had concluded that he had difficulty with the story you were telling.
That's right.
But indeed you, sir, had evidence and documentation to back up the story you were telling.
I had all the documents. I showed fraud at a bank. A bank was suppressing information. The Scarsdale National Bank was suppressing information that my wife had accounts at the bank. I had an investigator bring it out, and I found it. Well, to make a long story short...
Were those documents introduced into evidence? Were they introduced into
all
evidence? So the jury had that as well as the judge's expression?
Yes.
Right.
The case was won by me, all right? Complete verdict in my favor.
So there's no corruption at that point?
Yes, there is. You don't have to, you know, corruption can exist even when you win a case.
But you were satisfied with the result?
Jay, may I hear the testimony?
All right. There were two parts to the case. The first part was for the question of who was right and who was wrong in a divorce. And there was one other section that had dealing with a house, who owned the house. The jury voted to give me the house and give me a divorce. A second section of the trial without a jury was for later. And that was to deal with the question of counsel fees and custody of the children.
Let me hear the results of that.
Okay. Well, anyway, before that, the judge overturned the jury and took the house back. Even though the jury voted to give me the house, he said, well, I didn't leave that for you. That's my right. I have decided I'm going to give the house to Diane.
Did he say their verdict was against the weight of evidence? What did he say?
He said that as far as he's concerned, he's going to reserve the right to make that decision, and that the jury really did not. He would take their decision under advisement, but that he was going to maintain the right to do it. I go to the appellate division, and I asked them for the stay. and I present, and these are things that are very normally granted as a matter of course, because it's so reasonable. You're just asking for a little time so you can appeal the case.
But they're not always granted. They're not always granted, are they? They're not always granted.
I would say always. I never heard of one grant.
Is it within the discretion of the court to grant or deny a stay?
I have never heard of a
You didn't answer my question. Isn't it within the discretion of the court?
Yeah, everything's within.
And that court decided not to grant the stay. Is that right?
Right. Okay. I make another motion again, the exact same motion, because I can't believe it. I think maybe they made a mistake. I go down, and the clerk says, we denied it again. The same judges denied it unanimously. I go, I can't understand this. He says, well, let me talk to you in the back room here. He kind of takes me on the side and he says, you know, if you leave out a little of that stuff about the corrupt judges, maybe I could swing it for you. I make the exact same motion again, leaving out those parts, goes before the exact same judges. They unanimously grant me the motion. He comes down and says, your motion's granted. I got it for you, Stanley. I got it for you. Thinking back to my own old criminal court days,
Did you know this
you'll have
clerk?
to take this as, I just met him.
Did you know the clerk?
I've met him when I met over there. I got the distinct feeling he was trying to shake me down. But
So he was corrupt also now.
That's right.
Did he ask you for anything?
No.
Did you
At that
offer him
point.
anything?
No.
So you have no real evidence that he was
No.
trying to shake you down?
No. But the only evidence I
But
have
you
is
do
that
say he is corrupt, nevertheless.
Yes, because there were three. Because he controlled the decisions. It was the exact
What
same
evidence?
motion.
Wait, hold it. Wait a second. You've indicated the appellate judges are corrupt. What is the basis for that charge?
Well, that's I'm going to have to continue as I get into it.
Just
We'll
answer,
this
what is
just
the basis
first
for
side.
your charge? The appellate division,
So we don't
department
take all night,
was
gentlemen.
corrupt.
Please
Right.
get to this point. I'd like to
All
move
right.
on with the show and
We
meet some
move on
corrupt
to the
judges.
second. We move on to the second trial.
We haven't answered
The
the question
second
about
trial.
corruption
I
yet.
told you that's coming.
Zip it.
The second trial, we get the question of custody. I was co-custodian of my children. My father dies. I go before the judge. I ask, give me a chance. My father just died 20 days ago. He says, you're going to go right now, buddy boy, because he heard about my complaints about him.
A different judge?
Same judge. It's back to can't get away from him. I try everything. I can't get away from the guy. And he's out to get me, and I can't do anything. The case is just unbelievable. They start talking to me about my complaints against the judges. That's the whole case. They're asking me about the complaints and if I'm writing a book about the subject. Deanna testifies that she has accounts. The judge refuses to accept what she's saying as true. She's saying to them that
Give
she
me the
has
bottom
accounts.
line. I see at least a thread of corruption here. All right. Give me the bottom line. I want to go on with the show.
I appeal to the appellate division after the decision's made. He grants the lawyers $50,000 based on the fact that my wife had no accounts and no money. She was staying at the Plaza Hotel on weekends. She had a full-time maid. She claimed she was destitute. The judge said, I am ruling that she had no money. I have checks that show
Well, I'm
that
going to
she
object.
paid.
This is not probative of anything in terms of judicial corruption.
Overruled.
There is no proof at all.
Let me ask you a last question. Let me ask you a last question. Counselor, what percentage of judges in New York metropolitan area do you think are taking graft?
The word graft, I would put in maybe, according to Chicago
Favors
studies,
and graft.
Oh, graft on a Broadway.
We know of the Gray Lord case in Chicago where they've indicted 17 to 23 judges
Right.
already.
The judge who took care of that case, of that matter, Judge Lockwood, estimated that 1 out of 8 were corrupt over there. I would say in New York City, more like 7 out of 8 are corrupt. Judge told my wife not to let me see the children, even though I was co-custodian. I appealed to him, and he said, no, you can't see the children, and
Well,
there
so
was no
far
hearing.
from what we've heard in the first segment of the show, it seems like the gardener's the only one who wasn't a blooming idiot. We'll be right back. Court is in session. Jay, Counselor, you, of course, sir, as many people do, have great respect for the majority of our judges. In all of your years as an attorney, have you ever known a corrupt judge?
If I had known a corrupt judge, my responsibility and his responsibility is to go to the appropriate authorities and present that evidence. Not to sit on television and make these empty charges, and the answer to your question is
Who are the
no.
appropriate authorities to go to?
Very simple. Very
hear this,
simple.
please.
Very simple. In New York, the district attorney. In New Jersey, the prosecuting attorneys. In New York, there is a judicial commission. People take their complaints to those authorities.
So you're saying
and they're
you've
acted
never
upon.
met a corrupt judge?
I have never met a judge who I perceive was corrupt in
All
any
right,
manner.
well, counsel. Let's continue the show, please.
And Mort, if any one of you have the same responsibility. Go to the DA.
Jay, have you ever been held in contempt of court?
Never.
You're getting close to it. Huh? Let me introduce you, counselor, to the Honorable Barbara Sims, former judge, City of Buffalo, Erie County, New York. Barbara, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Fine.
Barb, Your Honor,
Yes,
have
Barbara's
you
fine.
ever, all right, while sitting on the bench, violated any rules of ethics or broken any civil or criminal laws?
No.
Eddie, you have some papers for me, please? May I have them? May I have them, please, sir? Thank you. Barbara, let me read to you from the State of New York Commission of Judicial Conduct. Judge Barbara Sims released one Walter Jones, charged with assault and menacing on his own recognizance. And he turned up the following Monday in front of another judge represented by Judge Sims's husband. This is one of 10 indictments on this report, Your Honor. Now, you're in my court. How do you respond to that?
Two ways. First of all, there was nothing wrong with that. But the second thing is that the
Nothing
people...
wrong
Wait,
with you
just
releasing
moment.
a
You
man
asked
on
me
his
a
own
question, let me
recognizance.
answer it.
He
But
shows
what
up
was not
before another
wrong with it
judge,
was
and
that
the lawyer representing him
that
is
was
your
supposed
husband.
to have tried me did not get authority to act until February the 2nd, 1982. And they are referring to acts which, if they had been wrong, occurred in 1978 and 1979. Now, anybody who is a student in 8th grade knows that you can't have ex post facto laws. You can't make a law in 1982 and say, oh, well, back in 1978 or 79, you did this, that, or the other
So it was
thing.
grandfathered
Therefore,
in.
no.
How did Walter Jones get to your husband as a lawyer? How did
Excuse me?
How did Walter Jones get to your
He
husband?
walked into his office, I presume. I was on the bench, so you would have to ask Walter.
Did you ever recommend anyone who appeared before as a judge to appear before your
not.
husband?
Absolutely not. I didn't have to chase cases for my husband.
Your Honor, why are you no longer on the bench?
I was not on the bench any longer because the Judicial Conduct Commission began an, in quotes, investigation of my conduct 25 days after I won an election as the first and only black person, man or woman, who had ever won an election against a white person in a head-to-head election in upstate New York.
So you're saying then this is racist motivated?
Well, that's one of the reasons. I'm not saying it is the reason. I'm saying it is a component.
You have sent your people out to investigate the people who sat on that committee?
I certainly did for the past 10 years.
And those people indicated to you that this was a racist commission that had you removed?
I said that that was a component.
Did the Court of Appeals agree with the commission?
No.
How about the other 10
Just
charges?
Let me answer
How about
the
the other
question.
10 cases?
Let me answer that one
Right.
question.
Weren't
Then
there
I'll come
10
to
of
you.
them?
Then I'll come to you.
Were there 10
then
of
I'll
them?
come to you. Okay. What happened was the Judicial Conduct Commission made a recommendation that I be censored.
Okay. Which is
Okay.
not to be discharged,
That's
but to
right.
be... Okay.
I appealed the case,
To what court?
the Court of Appeals.
Right, what do they do?
They said they recommended that I be removed, but you got to...
And that is also bias, is that right? So you have two bodies that
Well,
were
wait
biased.
a minute. The commission didn't get any authority to act until 1982.
But I'm going beyond.
How are they talking about, what are they talking about, acts that happened in 1978 and
Did the Court of Appeals have
1979
authority to discipline you even after
No,
the commission?
no.
That's your position.
No, it's not my position. It's the law of the United States that the...
Did you appeal from the Court of
Excuse me,
Appeals?
The Court of Appeals can only do what the Judicial Conduct
Absolutely.
Commission
Did
can
you
do. If the
appeal from their
Judicial
decision?
Conduct Commission had no jurisdiction, the Court of Appeals had no
Did you
jurisdiction.
appeal from the action of the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in the state of New York?
Where
Did you
to?
appeal?
Where to?
I'm asking you. Did
Where
you
to?
appeal?
No.
So that court, in fact, discharged you.
Let me say something to you. I had lawyers, and I could tell you their names if you want to know some of them. I had lawyers who were making these decisions for me.
Right.
They went against the decision that I made to even appeal it to the Court of Appeals. I did not even want to appeal it because I was in federal court at that time.
But why don't you
and I
tell
didn't see
these
any
people the Court of Appeals is the highest court of the state of New York, and they have to be biased also in order to accept.
Why not?
Is that right?
If you said
is that what you're saying?
You said it.
I'm asking you if you're saying it.
If what I am saying is that the Court of Appeals had no jurisdiction and they knew...
Yet your attorneys felt comfortable enough to appeal this to the Court of Appeals. You say they had no jurisdiction. Your attorneys, obviously, if you become your own attorney, even if you're a judge, you're a fool.
Let me tell you something. At that time, it was not known that the Court of Appeals had not had jurisdiction. Let me tell you why quickly, Morton. I won't take up much time. In order for a court to have jurisdiction or an administrative agency, you not only have to file the rules that are given, the Court of Appeals had to approve them, and then they had to be filed with the Secretary of State before they become operable.
Let me ask you a hypothetical.
Isn't that true? Isn't that true?
Did the Court of Appeals have authority?
Any law has to be filed with the Court of Appeals before it becomes operable. With the Secretary of State.
Let me ask a simple question.
Go ahead.
Had the Court of Appeals reversed the commission, would you have accepted their decision as right and gone back on the bench?
I would not have known at that. I never was removed by the
But
Judicial Conduct
would you have
Commission.
accepted that decision?
I had done absolutely nothing. I had done absolutely nothing.
I'm asking again, would you have accepted the
They
decision?
never should have even brought the investigation in the first instance. They had no jurisdiction.
You asked a question, sir, about 10 other, you asked a question about 8, 9, or 10 other indictments. May I hear that?
What happened with the rest of the indictments?
All right. What happened was I was appointed in 1978 to fill an interim term. In other words, I was a temporary judge. During that time, I released 3 defendants on bail out of about 2,000 that, after they were released, retained my husband. That was supposed to be an ethical violation. If you know where it's written, maybe you or you as attorneys know. I've never seen it. But they said that that was an ethical violation. During the year 1979, out of about 4,000 people, I released 7 defendants who retained my husband after they got released. In the Court of Appeals decision, if you've read it, it said that I should have known that if I let those defendants out on bail, they might retain my husband, and therefore that was an ethical violation.
Now, with the judicial, he asked if I made complaints. Of course I made complaints. I complained to the Judicial Conduct Commission, and I complained to the district attorney. My complaint to the district attorney, I sent to the district attorney before the second trial began the evidence of the accounts, the evidence of forged checks. I had proof of forgeries. I showed
handwriting experts?
Handwriting experts. I had bank accounts, and what the judge...
Did your wife get any experts to refute the facts?
None whatsoever.
Go ahead.
The district
They got
attorney...
a psychiatric expert, didn't they, Stanley?
We're talking about something else now.
Did they get a psychiatric expert?
Let me ask the question. Let me ask the question. Did they get a psychiatric expert?
Yes. And I'll answer
What
that.
did the psychiatric experts say, sir,
With what?
about you?
They said that I was paranoid. They
Right.
said... They said...
Did
that-
you indeed supply... Did you indeed...
Stanley, did they ask you
Did
about...
you indeed supply information from your own psychiatrist to prove you were not?
Yes, my psychiatrist said that I was not paranoid.
Okay.
The basis of their
Perhaps
finding
you
that I was
should tell
paranoid was
excuse
that
me,
I had had a paranoid belief that my wife had a lover. This was the basis of the finding that I was paranoid.
Let me see a picture of
Second
Stanley.
basis.
Let me see a picture of Stanley at the time of that trial, please. May I have that up on the monitor? I believe we have that in still store. This is from Stanley's own. This is from Stanley's own book. And if I didn't know better, I would think it was Charles Manson. Tell you what, I'm going to introduce you to a guy who was shot in the stomach with a .357 Magnum by his wife, and she was sentenced dramatically to 75 minutes in jail. Now, Let me introduce players on home base you already know. Let me introduce another attorney, George Sassower, who is this barred attorney.
Right. I was admitted...
Wait a second, George. Sheldon Bross. Sheldon, let me come back to Sheldon. I call you... wait a second. I want to call Sheldon to the stand right now. You had a very interesting run-in with the judicial system, one that cost you and your client several $1 million. Briefly, and I mean briefly, please, tell me the story.
I tried a case in July, an accident case. The jury awarded my client $5 million. A motion was made because of excessiveness. It's one of the highest verdicts ever in the state of New Jersey. A judge ruled that that verdict was excessive. He threw it out. I had to retry the case. I disagreed with the judge, but he was honest, he was intelligent, he was fair, and he ruled against me.
How much did you get the second time around?
$3 million.
$3 million. Okay. Now, George, now I want to come to George. I want to come to you by asking you the first question. Will you shut up? It's no wonder you were disbarred. Let me ask you a question, pal. You had a little run-in with the courts, too, all right?
Yes.
You're a lawyer.
Yes.
You were disbarred.
Yes.
Tell me your piece, and unlike the other attorneys,
Fine.
please try and keep it brief.
Okay.
Come here.
Puccini Clothes, Inc. was dissolved in 1980 by law.
All right.
By law, an accounting must be filed at least once a year. It's almost 9 years, no accounting has been filed. Puccini is called the judicial fortune cookie.
George, why are you disbarred?
What the
Why are
hell
you
is all
disbarred?
this about?
George, look at me. Why were you disbarred?
Pardon me?
Why were you disbarred?
Because I would not keep quiet about the larceny by judges and their cronies. Fine,
What larceny?
That's all.
What larceny? Where?
What larceny?
Name the
Tell
larceny,
us.
please, and name the judge.
Fine.
Right.
Name the judge that you know there was larceny involved with.
Murphy, Riccobono, Gammerman. Here is.
What was their larceny, sir? How did they enrich themselves, their families,
You know, Mort,
or their
can I
associates?
interrupt for a second? Mort,
Or their associates. Just a second,
long
Jay.
time ago-
Jay, I'll come
Okay.
to you in just a second.
Money does not go directly to judges. It goes to their benefactors, their social cronies. In Supreme
You
Court,
know, this really sounds like bull.
it is.
hold it, George.
You want
George,
the
hold,
check?
George, hold it,
You
George.
want the check? Here it is.
Right.
Wait a
He's
second.
absolutely right.
Then
Mort.
let me hear from. Hey, listen, I won't use the gavel there. I'll use it in your mouth.
Go ahead.
Now let me hear you.
Mort, this is a disgrace, and let me tell you why. In the 1950s, we had a United States senator that stood up one day and said, I have the names of 81 people who were communists, and he never showed one of them. Neither of these men have demonstrated
Fine.
a single judge being corrupt. Let them show it.
Listed
I'll show
10
you one.
judges. Maurice
I'll show you
Sajari
one.
indicted 10
Let's
judges.
see
Listen
them.
to
Go
me.
ahead.
Okay.
Let's see them.
Here is a court order that money that was payable to the court. To the court. Here are checks made payable to his attorneys, the cronies of the court. Millions of dollars. You want $4 million of disbursements to the judge's cronies?
And did you
Who
tell
are the cronies, sir?
Here,
Who are the cronies?
Kreiner and Relkin, Spillman, Parrish, Major, and Fargus. You want the checks? Now, I'll tell you something else. You should know as an attorney.
Where was the district attorney when all of this is happening? Where is the district attorney? Yeah. Where are they?
You got to read the book and you'll find out.
The DAs, the U.S. attorneys, do not blow the whistle on the judges. Now, you wanted to prove it? Get an accounting. An accounting is overdue by 8.5 years.
Let me ask you. Go back there. Go back there. Let me ask you something. Whoa, man.
So, Mort, now
Let
we
me
have
ask you a
corrupt...
question. Do we have Is Scope a sponsor of this show? Give him a case of it. Let me ask you a question. Have you brought charges through a district attorney?